Welcome back to another episode of JuicedCast. We are on the 18th episode, and today we are joined by a very special guest. But before we get there, I want to introduce my co-host, Saucyy Mango. How's it going, bro?
I'm super pumped today for our episode. Uh, DTX and I have been in this industry for quite some time, and we've always had sort of our journey to getting to where we are today. And I think today is a really cool episode because we're taking a little rewind back into sort of, at least for myself, my beginning days, and where I started to learn a lot of the material I know and has played an impactful role in terms of my success and growth. So without further ado, we have Syed on today from Syed Soles in the UK. How's it going, Syed?
Yeah, good man. How you doing?
Doing well. Super pumped to have you. We're ecstatic to sort of hear, where you are today and how you've grown and sort of the type of work you do for our industry today. So let's get you started off. Just share a little bit about your journey and where did it all start for you?
Yeah, sure. Thanks for inviting me on, guys. I do appreciate having this platform to have a chat with you guys. All right, where did I start? Probably like 2017, 18 time. I remember speaking to a friend. We were in the car together, and he was talking about some Yeezys or something at the time. I can't remember, but I was so clueless about this whole opportunity to really make money. I was sort of like the standard, I was like maybe like 19, 20 or something then. And then he was telling me like how he resold some Yeezys, made a few hundred pounds. And it just seemed like a crazy perspective to me. So I was like, oh, okay, cool. So I started following a few accounts on Twitter and sort of just gradually got into it. But then, yeah, like just to sort of summarize, because I can go on about this for ages. But I started working for a little group called Drop a Clock. Well, they were little at the time. They're doing quite well now. Eventually, I got a job with BalcoBot, doing support there. Ended up also working at Phasma AIO, which is an EU bot, and sort of did some PR stuff there. Over time, moved on and made my own group, sort of brand, I could say, called The Essentials, which is comprised of like three major groups, which is Essentials North America, EU, and China. And then we also made Essentials Proxies as well. And now I'm also working for RAF in their sort of PR department. And also I work as a full-time dentist. So yeah, that's basically me.
That's amazing. Wow. So you got like a whole lot on your resume. So what I was going to say is, you mentioned all these positions you've done. Like, how have you gradually been able to sort of move from job to job, or I guess, work to work in this industry? How have you sort of made that climb? What would you say is sort of the key thing for you?
Yeah, so I listened to the interview you guys did with Michael, and I feel like there's probably a lot of key points which overlap between us in a sense.
Mhm.
I think one is just the importance of building relationships, and that's something that's a really generic blanket term, and it's so easy to just sort of brush that off as like, yeah, it's obvious, but it really is just so important. Just doing little things like being nice to people, explaining to people, like just being genuinely helpful,
Mhm.
without sort of aiming to get anything in return is quite a good thing. The way I first got my job at BalcoBot was me and Wick. I'm sure you guys will know Wick. We made
Mhm.
we both used to work in Drop a Clock. That's how we met. I told him about a bot called BalcoBot. I thought it was a scam at the start. I'm not going to lie. And then we ended up getting it. We got it for retail. At the time it only supported Adidas, I think, and then he added Shopify. So we basically wrote him like a master guide. And then just through doing that, we sort of got the job. He didn't ask us to write a master guide or anything, and I think that's one thing within this industry that you kind of have to do, and that is taking initiative yourself to sort of go out of your way to do things. People don't realize they need something until you sort of give it to them on a plate.
Yeah, that's a
If
really
you
good
ask,
point.
honestly, and if you, and some of like my best staff members in Essentials and people I've worked with, some of the best people I've worked with are people that get shit done before you even know that it needs doing,
Yeah,
and it really does make a difference.
I would even go as far as to say, like, even just voluntary work in the sense that, they are looking for people who are hungry, people who are looking to bring something to the table that they don't have or they don't know they want. And it's coming from a place of motivation, because some people just do it for the sort of compensation or the perks or the money, right? But if you're there
Mm.
to sort of gauge that experience, grow, and all that, that brings a lot more to the table for them, I'd say. But I'm gonna, ask one more question before I pass you off to DTX. But you obviously come from the UK. Do you mind sharing a little bit about how different that is? I mean, I'm not too sure if you've had much experience yourself being in the US or just overall business in the US, but how different would it be in the UK as a reseller, botter, all that, compared to other parts of the world?
UK is and the EU is complex right now. The EU as a whole is quite complex to be botting, etc. And it's been complex for the last 2 years at least.
Mm-hmm.
I think the last easy drop maybe was. Do you remember those like OG court purples? I think they were like
Yeah,
2019
the
or
women's
something.
shoe, right? Oh, the
No, the
core purples
men's.
from back in
Yeah,
2019.
yeah,
Yes,
exactly. Them
yes.
ones. That was like the last sort of easy Footlocker EU drop, and that's the last one where a lot of people hit like a good number of pairs. I mean, I had like a very basic
Balco
setup, and
did
even
really
I hit
well then. I
like
remember that.
it. I think yeah, it did in the US, it did. But the EU, that was like, I remember if you had Ganesh back then and you ran it up, you're probably hitting at least, at least most people were hitting at least like 3-4 pairs. Even with like a pretty basic setup, I think I hit like 20 of those, and then literally as soon as that drop ended, it was like the Footlocker EU, which is the EU sort of main site in terms of stock, basically just collapsed, and it just got very, very complex. In terms of how I function at the minute with US and EU, I don't actually bot EU anymore. And the reason for that is just because of time commitments. And I just find it really difficult to be able to do it whilst also balancing my other projects. What I do
Mm-hmm.
now is I run slots for one of my admins in Essentials called Atlas, and he's based in the US. So basically, I just mainly run Footlocker US, Ease Supply, sort of just major stock sites in the US. I also don't
Mm-hmm.
bot Shopify that much just because of how much time it takes to sort of be setting
It's
up every
frustrating.
single hour. Exactly. So I try to go for not less effort drops, but drops where I know they're going to be allocating more stock to give me a better sort of chance at hitting. Although even those are quite complex right now.
Yeah, your easy supply and foots and all that. It's a
Hmm.
lot. I don't want to say necessarily easier because it's always changes being made compared to Shopify,
Yeah.
but you know what you're getting yourself into, if that makes sense, right?
Yeah, exactly.
Okay, so kind of like going into branching out into what other stuff that you do. You're in reselling, you're a botter, and you're a content creator. Um, how have you been able to push out content that caters towards like such a diverse range of skill sets and reaching out to so many people?
Yeah, so with the whole YouTube thing, it's interesting because we're already within a niche in itself in that it's reselling. Botting within reselling is like a further niche, and then I feel like the content that I enjoy pushing out is sort of things which are even more targeted towards people who are like quite in on like the whole sneaker Twitter scene and stuff.
Mm-hmm.
For me, this is just like stuff that I genuinely enjoy doing, and I don't think I would really enjoy putting out, especially now. I wouldn't necessarily enjoy putting out like loads of beginner content. When I started making YouTube videos relating to the whole like sneaker reselling stuff in like late 2018, early 19, I think I was more prone to sort of pushing out content which was a bit more accessible to beginners. And I think a lot of people who make content now do a really good job of that. People like goes without saying, like Lucky Botter, E-Man, like
Yeah.
George's Ginger is really good as well. Like these guys put out really good accessible content. Even Nova's videos are fantastic in that they're they're obviously like within using like bots and stuff, but he presents them in a way in which like the average reseller or someone who doesn't necessarily resell
User
but has an
friendly, right?
interest, exactly, it's
Yeah.
just very accessible. Whereas the content I enjoy producing is I feel like it's more targeted towards a very specific niche. But to be honest, the whole YouTube thing for me is just, it's a hobby. I don't feel like I have that pressure to push videos out. Like I've not uploaded in 2 weeks now, and
Mm-hmm.
that's because I've just been so busy with other projects. But I don't feel like I have that necessarily those constraints, which I'm quite happy to be in a position where I don't have those. Whereas I know some of the other guys who do YouTube do sort of feel that stress and that pressure, especially when it comes to live cops, because live cops are really, really dependent on obviously you hitting. There's only so many
Yeah.
videos you can put out without hitting a zero clip. It sort of depends on you hitting those videos, and I know that's why a lot of these guys have a lot of stress when it comes to that. Botterboy Nova's recently addressed this. Lucky Bot has addressed this as well, and I've spoken to other guys like Ricky, Gumpy, etc. They all have these stresses when it comes to live cops. So I think providing an alternative sort of flavor of content is good to mix up, and also reduces the stress on content creators.
Mm-hmm.
So you said that your YouTube channel is kind of targeting a specific niche, but your videos sometimes range, like you said, like it's not just live cops. So as a content creator on YouTube, what videos do you enjoy filming the most, and why?
Honestly, the ones I enjoy filming the most are the it's stuff like talking about PR within the industry, talking about like the bot market, talking about loads of these little nuances which are actually really important. You know what I mean? And it's just things like that. Things I think it's more like community related stuff, to be honest, because for me that's a large part of my job. Regarding PR work and stuff that you do in that sort of sector, you really need to understand the community and have a sort of like a good grasp of what the community wants, how the community is functioning. Like if you look at the community now on sneaker Twitter compared to how it was maybe like 2 years ago, 3 years ago, it's a completely different game. And even in the past like 2 weeks, the whole community has changed compared to how it was maybe like a month ago.
Yeah.
And that's dependent on things like how easy it is to bot, how expensive bots are. You've got bots crashing in prices. I mean, there's multiple companies at the minute who are like in the process of shutting down just because there's so few drops and they're struggling to stay afloat. And it's sad to see, but it is a very sort of cutthroat industry. And so understanding that community is often the pathway to true success within this industry. And you'll see it from a number of different companies who are thriving at the minute. If you look at companies like Nick Bremen, for example, he's got a great empire going on right now. He's got Ominous, he's got
Ominous,
Malice.
Malice, yeah.
Exactly. At the minute, personally, I don't think there's anyone else who truly understands the community as well as Nick. I think he's doing a banging job. And same with Garrett with GFNF. The way that them two manage their businesses which are hugely community orientated. And I don't just mean community orientated within their groups, but also within sort of how they operate publicly on Twitter and interact.
Yeah.
I'm hugely envious of how they do that. And I've not managed to do that for my products or the products which I represent to that level. But it just shows, I think, that understanding the community is just so important when it comes to sort of pushing a product and getting your product out there on this platform.
Yeah, I wouldn't even say as far as like really like nailing down what people want, like you mentioned, that's like the primary thing when it comes to pleasing your consumers. I think the most successful people, and what we've noticed is most of them immerse themselves in the community as much as possible, and they've had their own fair share of experience in it, right? The ones that sort of try to break into the industry and just start their own sort of empire, whatever it may be, without lack of sort of their own personal experience, is not going to go very far, And so
Exactly.
you have like you said, Nick Bremen, who started TBB, all that stuff, and now they've sort of built that up. I think it's like understanding that sort of. You mentioned you listen to the podcast with Michael, so that was really cool. But we talked about sort of that building that umbrella, right? Like how you can sort of diversify, build your way up, and then expand. So I think that's really cool. But sort of building off sort of whether it may be PR, content creation, or whatever. We have a lot of people who want to do that stuff today, whether they're already in the industry and have sort of built a small name for themselves, or they're looking to start from scratch. What are some tips you can share? Whether it may be trying to just do some live cops tutorials, or starting your own sort of Twitter account and looking to provide some services for these big groups and say I have this capability and I want to help your business grow. How do you go about that?
So probably split this question into two, one on the YouTube side and one on more of like the whole business side of things. So I think in terms of YouTube, if you want to do it, the easiest way to sort of start it is sort of just doing live cops, I think. And although I already demonstrated sort of the difficulties in doing so, but they're just so easy because once you push out a couple, the YouTube algorithms just work so well, and it will start pushing your videos to people who also watch, people like Nova, Lucky Botter and stuff who get loads of views anyway. Also, it's not really a saturated niche right now. It's certainly more it's more saturated now than it's ever been, but it's nowhere near saturated to like how it could be. So like for example, if you talk a few years ago, I was quite integrated into like the whole like COD trick shotting scene and stuff, and this was maybe like 2013, 14 or something, and that was like those were like OG days of it. That's like when FaZe like had their first interviews on that podcast. I can't remember what it was called, but it was called like Sniper's Nest. Anyway, I digress. But back then, like even people were saying like, oh, it's so saturated. But if you look back then compared to now, like that back then was nowhere near saturated, not even like 1% compared to what it is now. So I think people who are saying like the whole live cop game is saturated now is, I personally think that they're probably not seeing the bigger picture in that. Think about how many people bot, think about how many people resell. And if we're going to say like, 100, 200 people who post live cop content are saturating the scene, I disagree with that. What I would also say is that it's good to have content that you can reliably post even when you can't cop pairs through live cops. And I think that's where things like educational content comes through as well. Obviously, that depends on your skill level as well. What I would say is that you want to develop a good relationship with your viewers, and that's something that people like Josh, Lucky, aka Lucky Botter, have done really well, because they get on a level with their viewers, and they don't push sales, because as soon as you start YouTube, you'll have like people jumping on the bandwagon trying to sponsor you, because it's the conversion rate on YouTube is fantastic compared to other platforms, which is one thing I noticed since I started doing it. If you want to push a product, YouTube is a great way to do it, because you have that level of human interaction that you can't really get on other platforms like Twitter and Instagram and things like that, where it almost looks like a corporate body's constantly trying to push a product on you. On YouTube, they're sort of seeing a face trying to sell that product. So it works. But also, if you start selling, if you use it as like I need to think of the words here. If you use it as a platform where you're just going to shove a product down people's throats, then you lose that level of connection, that level of genuine connection with your viewers, which is what unfortunately some people end up doing. If we're going to talk about the whole business side of things, there's one thing actually I was thinking earlier today, and this is just based on interactions with a few people who I've been discussing. Look, I understand everyone's quite young in this industry. I can't imagine the average age being more than like 20, maybe.
Yeah, just 19, 20. Yeah.
Honestly, exactly. I feel I'm 24 and I feel old sometimes, which is weird. But yeah, like you got to be serious. Like, don't get me wrong. There's a fun element to it, and I'm not saying you got to wake up every morning and send your like cook group owner a good morning text. But what I am saying is that like
professionalism.
Exactly. There's a level of professionalism, and also there's a level of sacrifice. If you truly want to achieve things, you can't be like, oh yeah, like I'm going out with some friends, I'll try and call you later, and then you don't reschedule the call. If you want to do shit, you got to sacrifice. Okay, there's a lot of sacrifice involved if you want to be successful. These bot devs do not do well by going out every weekend and having a great time. When I was working for Balco Bot, the guy was stressing constantly. He was constantly stressed. But how successful has Balco been? The dev. Yeah, Balco is the dev of Balco Bot. So he was constantly stressed. He was constantly working on this product. The guy would, like he would sleep, wake up, work, and he did a huge amount of work, and it resulted in a really successful product. It's the same as what Jason does now. Every successful bot dev I've ever really worked with or spoken to, or business owner, people like Jake, people like Michael, they put in a shift and they sacrifice things. And that's one thing I think that is also important, is that you need to sacrifice to be able to do well, like to be able to truly do well. I think it's quite a low barrier for entry if you wanted to do things like just basic cook group support, etc. But if you seriously want to reap in the rewards within this industry, you do need to sacrifice a lot in terms of your time. But in the long term, you tend to appreciate it.
So how do you take it a step further? Like you said, sort of, sorry, DTX, we'll get to shortly after, but you said you start with sort of like basic support, whatever, building as a PR, but how do you take that next step, saying I want to do more for you, or I want to be able to do this on Twitter, take the next step as a PR, social media specialist, whatever it may be?
You got to show initiative. You can't, personally, for example, if someone said, I want to do PR for you, should we try some PR? Like, I wouldn't necessarily take them on unless I've seen that they're capable of doing it. If not for my brand, then for another brand. But for example, like if I've my whole admin team now in Essentials, I've picked them based on the fact that they've gone over and above without me asking them to, and so they've proven that they can do these things. I feel like that's probably the same way I got my Balco job initially, where I sort of wrote that guide without even being asked to do so, and then naturally Balco probably thought, look, he's probably a good guy for the job. He probably doesn't think that anymore, but he certainly did at one point. And I assume that's also what Jason thought as well when when I worked with him in like December when the Wrath account got deleted, and I helped them reestablish some giveaways, etc., and then basically got my foot in the door with that. So I think if you have to, like what we said earlier, you have to sort of volunteer some of your effort, some of your time up front, and then what you get in return is far more valuable than something which was pre-agreed. I think a lot of people only sort of see the short term in this, in that like I'll only do the work if I know I'm going to get paid for it. Whereas what you need to see is sort of take a step back, see the bigger picture, the relationship you can build from giving
what it
your
translates to later on.
Exactly.
Right? Yeah.
Exactly. What the relationship you build is far more valuable than what you can get paid in the short term. And I think a lot of people are very short-sighted in that manner.
Mm-hmm.
That was actually going to be my next question. So as you got into, Wrath, how did you establish and, develop that relationship that you have with Jason?
Sorry, my Siri is kicking off. Apologies. 1 second. Sorry, do you mind saying that again? Apologies.
Yeah. So as you're getting into Wrath, and so I think you said in 2020, correct?
Yep.
How did you establish that relationship and develop it with Jason, the owner of Wrath?
Yeah. So just spoke to Jason a little bit previously. It takes a while to, I don't know how to say this without boosting my own ego and sounding like a prick. Like it takes a level of I don't say clout, but it takes a level of like being integrated in the community to be able to just sort of pull up in people's DMs and just have a chat with them. I feel like trust me, I know, like I started at the bottom, and I completely understand. I messaged one of the guys from Sole the other day, and I actually saw like our last DM was from like 2018, where I like asked him a basic question and didn't get a response. And back then I probably got like really offended, but now like I completely understand, because like there's it's a different level, and that's sort of one thing that you've got to sort of respect and appreciate. I don't think I would have been in DMs and having like casual chats with Jason if I hadn't already established myself through Balcodebot, through the other work I'd already done. So it's all these things which take time to build your reputation as sort of like a positive person in the community, which sort of gets there. And yeah, so anyway, sorry, I'm diverging from the question. So the question was, how did I sort of get my foot in the door with Wrath? So yeah, just building that relationship with Jason gradually, I think. And then, as I said, just sort of helping with sort of rebuilding that Twitter brand of Wrath Software after basically they got suspended. And that was, me putting in my own time, helping set up giveaways, which I didn't need to, he didn't ask me to help him, but I did it anyway, because I wanted to help Jason, because I mean, personally, I like the guy anyway. But I thought I saw it as a brand which I would like to, help out. And I thought that to be able to do that, I sort of need to show that I can be of use to the brand. And so that's why I sort of went out of my way to start helping him. And then naturally it just progressed into being invited to join the team.
That's actually really interesting, because Jason, talking about young personalities, Jason is fairly young in the community, right?
Yes.
So based off of like, not to make, this entire segment about Jason, but based off of like, the interactions you've had with him, how would you say like he's taken the step up, being so young and managing such a big company? Like what would you say it takes for someone that young to, kind of make big moves like he does?
There are people I've met who are in their late 20s who are less mature than Jason, to be completely frank. The guy is like the guy is like a 30-year-old living in a 17-year-old body. That's probably the best way to describe it. Not to say that he's not a fun guy to be around, because he's good.
The work speaks for itself, right?
Exactly. And you've got to have that level of maturity and discipline to be able to build a product like he has. I mean, he's he's worked with a dev on Wrath, but as as far as I'm aware, he's put majority of the work into the product, majority of the work into its PR, especially in the early days, into building relationships and connections, and that's something that comes with a level of responsibility and maturity that you don't really see elsewhere, to be honest. I mean, when I was his age, did I have that level of maturity? Absolutely not. And that's probably why I'm doing bot PR rather than developing a software. So yeah, but I mean, it shows, and there's I don't know how to say it. Like it's not easy for people to replicate that, because I feel like there's probably a certain number of life experiences which have led him to become sort of the man that he is. And obviously we all come from different backgrounds and environments, but that's not to say that you can't achieve what Jason's achieved. I think that the beauty of Sneaker Twitter is that there's no system where you have to like present a resume to get a job. You know what I mean? Like if you want a job, you just present your work, you present your ability, and you can get it. There's no
It's
regulation.
not as formal, right?
Exactly.
Yeah.
And that's the beauty of it, is that it really allows people to thrive in a very, very short space of time. That's why we see so many bots coming out of the blue and then just starting to cook. And you see these devs like getting really popular and famous within a very short space of time. And you don't really see that in any other industry. So for example, within dentistry, for people to sort of establish themselves and get well known within the dental community, it takes years. They need loads of experience under their belt. They've probably done some like research papers. They've probably, worked with number of high ranking dentists and stuff like that. And it will take years to establish yourself as a dentist who's trustworthy, who's respected. Whereas within this industry, that can literally be like a period of weeks.
Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah.
So,
And
go ahead.
sorry. I was just saying, kind of what you were saying about, how young he is and, how he's taken that role. He's not the only one. There's so many bot developers out here that are 16, 17, 18 years old that have, dedicated their lives and their social life into, putting out such a good product, right? And that takes just a level of maturity, like you were saying, that, Jason holds.
Yep, absolutely. And it's more common than you think that you see a lot of younger people doing really well at such an early age. And I think a part of that is probably because of the whole hustle culture within sneaker Twitter.
Yeah,
Like
I was
if
gonna
you
say
speak
that.
to peer, and it's good because it brings out a really good work ethic within a lot of people. Recently, I've personally found it to also have quite a negative effect, especially when it comes to things like mental health and stuff. And often you can find yourself working hours and hours in the day. Like there's been too many days where I've just woken up. I've like, for example, on a weekday, this is how my normal day would pan out. I'll wake up, check Discord DMs, reply to urgent ones, flag ones I need to reply to later, go do my dental work, come back at 5 p.m. and then I'm basically straight back on Discord or doing like jobs that I need to do for FPR or doing other things, or like now, like I've started to learn to code as well, so I'm doing that, and then I'm asleep. Like there is no time for anything else, and that's constant every day for the past 9, not longer, like maybe like past like 2 years, right? And a lot of people do that. And when you start also adding in things like lockdown, like COVID, like relationships, etc., and it gets very difficult for people. And I think that's why you do see a lot of people with mental health problems within this space. And I think that's something that's probably not really been addressed as much as it should have done by now.
Yeah. Yeah, I see what you're saying. And I mean, I think the thing is, even speaking on sort of like technology, I think where we are in the age of technology, that's been really helpful in terms of helping people advance, right?
Yeah.
I think, given the sort of traumatic experience we've all gone through from a global standpoint with COVID, everyone's been able to sort of work from home remotely, all that. So that's presented a lot of sort of that also hustle culture, right? Some people losing their jobs, needing to find other outlets, sources of income. People are breaking into this industry one way or another. And that's why we're sort of seeing that constant turnover you're sort of referring to, I'd say, no? Let's backtrack a little bit into sort of networking. You said sort of how sometimes it is hard to reach sort of these well-established, high-profile people in our industry. And given sort of your rise and your climb, you kind of understand where that comes from now. So my question to you would be, you've able to establish your own personal brand, secure partnerships, sponsorships with big names now. What would you say is like, I guess, the biggest thing for people who may get discouraged when they sort of don't get that response or they don't get that affirmation they need?
Yeah. For every dub that you see on Twitter, there's 10 L's that have been taken, and that's something that I tell people who are in my staff team and stuff when they ask me like, oh, how do you progress to RAF PR or whatever? You take a lot of L's. You take a lot of L's, and people are never going to tell you how many bad experiences they've had. Bots are never going to tell you they've had a bad drop. It's things like that. Like it's all a matter of perspective, and this isn't just applicable to Twitter, like sneaker Twitter. It's everywhere. Like even like influencer Instagram and stuff. People are never really going to show you the bad sides of life. So I think it's important to realize that the negative experiences you have, they are just as important, if not more important, than the good ones. And whenever you do get rejected by someone for a sponsorship, for a partnership, you got to take a step back and you got to learn from it. If you don't learn anything from that rejection, you're not doing it right, because you have to understand that people are going to pick you if they feel like they can get value out of you. At the end of the day, it's business and it's not a charity. So people aren't going to pick you out for a favor unless you've spent time developing those relationships, like we've already discussed earlier. Being in the essentials, especially when we were like a smaller, earlier like group in like early 2020, we got rejected for basically every single bot partnership, every single bot group buy, everything. We got rejected for a lot of things, and that's just because we hadn't really established the brand image, and people hadn't, bot devs, etc. They didn't really care to give us any copies because they didn't see that they would be getting much value out of it. What they see now is that they see a group that's tailored around botting. They see a group of like-minded, experienced, and mature individuals who are very capable with using bots, and they see that as developing their user base into a stronger user base, which requires less support than other users would. And so that makes sense for them, because it means that they're going to be getting more checkouts per user, and they're going to have to spend less time supporting these users as well that we send over. So that's sort of my USP at the minute in terms of the essentials. But it's that sort of thing. Like I started presenting my group as that sort of mature experience level group because of the negative experiences we'd had in the past, where we were getting rejected because it didn't look like we were providing anything of value. I realized that our value point was providing like a high level of member or high level of user, and so that sort of translated well with bot developers, and so it's worked out well. You can't do that overnight. You've got to prove it, and it takes time. I'd say that when it comes to things like getting sponsors, especially if you're on the YouTube scene, there's always going to be someone that sponsors you, but you should be selective, because at the end of the day, you have a responsibility to the little community that you're developing within your YouTube videos. If every person that subscribes to you and watches your video is a real person, and you should understand that if you're promoting some shitty residential smart proxy or something, then you've got to that's on you. And if you then lose their trust because you've basically sold them a crappy product and they don't trust you anymore, then that's also on you. So I would say it's sometimes better to have no sponsorships than to just grasp at whatever. And it's the same for a group. Like, we've been contacted by some really sus companies saying, oh, we'd love to give you a group buy and stuff, and then you check their Twitter and they've got no success. In terms of building that community, and I keep going back to community, but I just really can't emphasize how important it is, whether it's at a small scale or a large scale. You need to have that level of responsibility and trust and connectivity with a community. And if you see the way that certain people do their things, there's for example, like Sneaking Over, KFC, they do very aggressive hype marketing, which works fantastic at a certain level. And I think that's, it's good for them and it works for them, and that's fantastic. And the brands that they represent, and they're happy with that. What I would say is I think it's probably more important for a lot of people, especially earlier on, to develop a stronger connectivity with a smaller group of people that actually like you for who you are, and not just following you to be able to get free keys and restocks and stuff. If you look at people, trying to think now, people like Loosh from what's it called, Restock World. If you look at his Twitter now compared to how it was a year and a half ago when it was at its prime, he's completely fallen off. And the reason for that is because he went with hyper aggressive marketing tactics. People basically followed him because they wanted in on Restock World, but as soon as Restock World no longer became popular, his popularity also dwindled. And that's something that's important to know. Whereas other people who sort of maintained like very like low levels or like moderate levels of popularity, but for their own personalities, people like Michael, people like Top Keck, people like that who people actually like for them rather than for their brands, they maintained sort of like a very consistent engagement rate with their followers. And I think that's something that's probably more important in the long term.
Yeah. So kind of going back to a company that you started with Essentials. Tell us kind of what sparked the idea with, you to start this umbrella, which supports regions such as US, China, and EU. So, what kind of made you want to get into this? And like, I'm assuming EU started first, and then you branched out. Like, what was the entire process?
It was actually the other way around. We started with US, and basically because I used to work in a group called Drop a Clock. Drop a Clock was at the start, it was like an Instagram based group, and hence it used to attract a very sort of beginner focus cohort of people. I enjoyed my time there, and I learned a huge amount from it, and the staff team was great, and that's where I gained most of my personal development from within this industry. What I wanted from then was sort of a change of scenery. I wanted to be in a group with people who were more deep in the whole botting game. I wanted people who were, talking about variance, talking about what delays to run, per millisecond, like the exact type of proxy, what company you're getting your ISPs from, things like that. And I wanted it to be in that level of detail, because after a while, when you do work in a more beginner focused environment, you kind of feel like you're going around in circles, and
You don't
there's sort of like
improve. Yeah.
exactly, and there's a huge amount of learning that comes with it. Every day in Essentials, even now, like I've been running this group for a year and a half, and even now, I feel like every day I open tickets and just see what my support staff are saying, and I'm learning so much from it. My bot setups are literally changing as I'm reading, like the information being put in the tickets. Members are telling me things I wasn't aware of, and that's something I'm proud to say. I'm learning.
Wow.
I'm learning stuff from members, and for a lot of group owners, I feel like they'll probably be embarrassed by that, because they sort of feel like they need to take the lead on it. But the reality is that there's always going to be people who are more specialized in certain areas than you are, and there's no shame in sort of learning from others, even if they don't have that, in quotations, that level of superiority within the environment that you're in. That's why I started Essentials. I wanted to do something a bit more tailored, a bit more advanced. And by doing so, I've enjoyed every minute of it, to be completely honest. And it's been fun, and I've learned a lot. From starting the Essentials initially, we found that we had a few people joining from the Chinese community who spoke Mandarin. And unfortunately for them, they found there to be a bit of a language barrier, and things got a bit confusing. So we ended up opening Essential CN, and that's been run by one of my very good friends called Rowan, who also works in Balcobot support. And he's been running and operating that, and that's been flowing really, really well. We recently opened Essentials EU. Essentials EU was basically split from US because there was just a lot of overlap of information, and it got a bit confusing, and also the whole like community aspect just felt a bit mixed and jumbled when it was Essentials EU and US in one sort of bubble. So we decided to split that. That was done maybe a few months ago now. It's been fairly successful. It's, the EU members love it there. It's something that no other group in the EU is really doing, in terms of having like a super bot focused group. And to be honest, that's the same situation in the US as well. In CN, there's another group called the Oil Edu, or the Oil Cop, which is sort of a bit more botting focused. But certainly in the US, I think we're probably the only people who are sort of running such a deep botting focused group at the minute. So that's been sort of a positive. Regarding when it comes to things like marketing and stuff, I think if you have like a very generic group, it can be quite complex to market that, because it's a very saturated market.
There's so much out there with the same idea, right? Yeah,
exactly. And as I said earlier, like, groups has been shutting down left, right, and center in the last few weeks. I think it's probably more generic groups that have been started recently. But when you've got groups which are targeting either a very specific social media platform such as TikTok or like Instagram, or like a very niche group like Essentials is, where you're targeting just like moderately experienced bot users, those groups tend to be doing better than ones who try to encompass everyone, because I think people now are at a level of understanding that you can't really be that successful if you're just average at everything. Like you've got
doing
to be
a little bit of everything. Yeah,
exactly. The game is so hard now that you have to be basically an expert in one area if you want to do well in it. Like, for example, you see some people who do really well at retail botting, but then when it comes to sneakers, they're completely clueless, and vice versa. And it's quite difficult to be great at both, because the resources involved, the amount of learning involved, the amount of time involved is just not feasible for a lot of people. And so that's sort of my take on that.
Well, like you said, sort of botting today is always changing. And in order to be successful in this industry, it's not even a matter of knowledge. It's a matter of trial and error, right?
Exactly.
Like you're constantly testing your setup, constantly improving, constantly learning from what other people have to share with you. And so I think it's not even just being average, but it's also you're finding that people are outgrowing their cook groups, if that makes sense, right? Like
Yeah,
in the sense that they basically absorbed everything they can from that group, and then they sort of move on, and they need to find something more specialized, more niche, more to what they need to fix up and fine tune, right? And I think that's what it
exactly.
really comes down to.
Yeah.
So, with the wide range of work you do, how do you manage to stay like competitive and maintain viewership, let's say even content wise?
Um, to be completely honest, the whole YouTube views thing doesn't really. It's not really something that I hugely care about. As I said earlier, the YouTube isn't like a major priority for me. It's more of like a hobby thing. I do enjoy doing it, and it's good to see like when you do get quite a few views. But in terms of viewership, I'd say probably the two main factors for getting maximum views are putting out live cops do well. Live cops are just easy formula for views. And then secondly is regular uploads. YouTube favors people who upload at least twice a week. So I'd say that if you are starting out on the whole YouTube thing, try and push out content regularly. I'm not saying compromise quality, but also just be serious about if you want to be like realistic about sort of getting quite big on YouTube, you do need to be regularly uploading, and it's not easy. Like live cops take a surprisingly long amount of time to edit. One live cop will take me about sort of maybe like if I'm really lucky and it doesn't need much
Couple
editing, it'll
hours.
be like exactly no, it'll take at least 3 hours, even like a basic edit. I've had some live cops which have taken like 6-7 hours,
Wow.
and it takes a long time. And if you then speak to people like Nova, people like MP Cooks who do like crazy edits, like their jobs will literally be like a whole weekend will just be for like one live cop episode, and that's literally like you're talking like 10-12 hours just for a video. And it's a shame when people see that and they just like click it, watch it, and then they'll just bash it for like such a small thing. And you just think
Yeah.
how much
Wow.
effort's been put into this. And it is difficult to appreciate though, unless you're the guy or the girl who's actually recording and editing this footage, because it looks like a really easy job on the surface, but there's so much. For God's sake, Siri. There's just so much effort involved in it, basically on the back end, and that's I think something that people underappreciate when they get started with the job.
Kind of
Mhm.
makes sense on I don't know if this is the main reason why, I doubt it, but like kind of makes sense on why a lot of live cop YouTubers are kind of taking a break now, like you
Exactly.
saw with Boy Nova with his what was it, Sneakers to Riches, or
Yes,
I'm blanking
exactly.
on the name of
Yeah.
the series, right? That was it, right?
Rags to
So
riches.
yeah, so he had said in his video, I actually got a chance to watch it, and he had said that it was taking a toll on his mental health, kind of taking kind of having to make those videos constantly and edit, like you said, it takes a lot of time. So just taking a step back and kind of like looking at what you've built. I mean, he's been doing it for a while, like since I started reselling. So I mean, the fact that he made it this long and was able to keep coming out with consistent high quality content is pretty impressive.
Absolutely. And I'm really not surprised that it's had an impact on him personally. It's just there's so much fuel involved in sort of like you get like naturally you get hate comments. You're always going to get hate comments.
Yeah.
Like you can't please everyone, and it's really difficult, especially on YouTube, because there's a really personal touch to it, as I mentioned earlier, in that your sort of face is on the screen, you're interacting with viewers. But it's a shame when people then sort of go out of their way to have a go at you. And this is something that Lucky Botter addressed a few times in his videos. But to be completely honest, I think you touched on his mental health as well. I think on the whole, this industry really needs to take a step back and just be serious about it, because there's been so many people who have really struggled with mental health in this game. People that you wouldn't even think would be struggling with it have been struggling with it a lot. And it's great when you go on Twitter and you see everyone's happy, hitting big clips. They've made loads of money. They're tweeting eye emojis, bot restocks are happening, whatever. Like it looks great on the surface, but when you really start like speaking to people and getting on a level with them, you realize that very little of their time is spent having these fun and games. A lot of it is hustling. A lot of it is self-doubt. Am I running this product right? Am I PRing right? Should I be doing this? Like this other product is doing better than mine. Like how does this make me feel and stuff like that? And it does take a toll on you, because most people who do this don't do it full time. They've got other stresses involved. They've got other things going on, and I
It's like a
think
side hustle. Yeah.
exactly. But it's a side hustle that takes up a full
So
time
much
job.
time. Yeah.
Exactly. That's the thing, and that's where you sort of I think that's what separates a lot of casual resellers from the serious ones. And in terms of that, there's a huge step. There's a huge step in terms of benefit, because the amount of money you can make on the scene is crazy. If you speak, like, some of the biggest names on the scene are literally raking in, like, it's actually ridiculous. Like, there's people I've spoken to,
6-figure months, like
easily,
Yeah.
easily. And it's crazy because you can get kids who literally start from zero, and within the space of a few months they'll learn like a
They
coding
scale
language,
up. Yeah.
and they'll be on 6-figure months, and you're just thinking, like, how on earth has this happened? But also it takes a toll, because you can't just take without giving. And whether that giving's through your mental health or your physical stress or breaking down relationships to sacrifice for it, there's a lot going on behind the scenes, basically. And I think one thing, if I could change about this scene, would be the community's maturity when it comes to
mental
accepting
health.
exactly mental health, and also the other negatives that come with reselling.
Kind of you get what you take out what you put in situation, right? How much
Exactly.
energy and time you're putting in is,
Exactly.
you're going to reap the benefits of that. But, I think mental health is a really important topic. And, me and Saucyy have talked about it with reselling in the past on prior episodes as well. And I just think, that, like you said, needs to be more taken serious.
Absolutely. I completely agree.
I think we've had a really good episode so far. For those of you that have made it this far, thank you guys for supporting us. And also, last but not least, thank you very much, Syed, for making it onto the podcast with us. I kind of wanted just to end off with one more thing. We usually ask most of our guests just to sort of get a little insight into maybe some upcoming future plans, projects you can share with some of our loyal listeners who want to get in on the ins and outs of what's going on.
Yeah, sure. So I don't want to dive into essential stuff too much, because a lot of it is sort of under wraps at the minute. But we're currently in talks and having some big plans, sort of going into Q4 of this year, I think. But that's something that I will announce it at some point, but just not at the minute. But from a personal side, I'm currently going sort of nose diving into development. From September, I'm cutting down my dental hours to about half the time. So I currently do 5 days. I'm going to be doing 2.5 days dental.
Wow,
and then the rest
amazing.
Just allocating. Thanks. Yeah. So and then the rest I'm going to be allocating to this stuff, basically. So at the minute, my main focus is sort of just getting like to a level of code where I can start assisting and start working on some projects. I think I'm very fortunate in the sense that I've got a good mentor in the form of Jason, who's been very patient with me thus far. And I feel like I feel like such an idiot, because I'm asking questions which he probably thinks are really basic.
That's really
but
cool.
to me, they're really deep. But yeah, exactly. So I'm in a fortunate position in
the best
in that
way to
sense.
learn.
Exactly. But yeah, it's I don't know if you guys have ever tried coding, but it's really frustrating.
Yeah.
But
I'm sort of in the same mindset. Like,
good.
In this industry, I want to learn that. And like this summer, I started like a 6-month sort of full stack program. I'm trying to get as much as I can. So that's cool that you're doing that as well.
Yeah, it's awesome. And I'm sure you'll agree that it is tough, but it's very rewarding as well. Like, when you finally grasp new concepts, it's incredibly rewarding, and you do feel very satisfied afterwards. So yeah, that's sort of my plan.
What have you learned so far, or what are you working on right now?
So I'm currently I'm learning Node at the minute. I had a short spell where I was learning a little bit of Python in the past. So I learned sort of very basic aspects of coding, things like functions, like if statements and stuff like that. But I sort of wanted to actually progress that. So I've started a course as well, and I'm sort of trying to bang that out.
That's amazing.
That's awesome, man. Looking forward to seeing what you can do with that, and hopefully we can get you back on the podcast when that gets up and running.
That'll be awesome. Thanks, guys.
Well, thank you everyone for listening to this episode. This was episode 18 with Syed. Make sure you drop a like and comment any suggestions you have for me and Saucyy Mango. Syed's social media is in the link in the description, as well as mine and Saucy's. If you have any questions, our Discords are on the screen. Anything else you want to add, Saucyy?
No, just thank you very much for joining us today, and looking forward to hopefully have you back soon with us. Let's keep in touch, Syed.
Thank you so much, guys, for having me on. I really enjoyed it. Thank you.
Thank you for coming on.
Perfect. Until next time, guys. Peace.